Hello, podcast listeners. We know podcasts are a great way to catch up on a program that you may have missed on KSJE, and it's provided as a free service of this radio station. But you know, KSJE is now listener supported, and so while you enjoy this podcast, we hope that you'll also take some time to join KSJE. Become a member today. It's quite easy to do. Just go to our website at ksje.com/support and pick the level of support that best matches your budget. Thanks again for listening. Here's your podcast. Joining me here in our visual radio studio on KSJE to continue talking about economic development, a very important topic these days, Arvin Trujillo, the relatively still new CEO of Four Corners Economic Development. Good morning.
Good morning.
Can we still say that? Still
you
new?
Bet. You can,
right?
I guess
it's not even a year, isn't it?
It's been what?
6 months?
No.
No?
5.
Okay. I still think then you're still new.
I'm still new.
Yeah, that's true. Welcome. It's good to have you back.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks for coming in. And you're talking a little bit about strategic planning these days, right? With your board and other folks, right?
Yes, we are really focused on what do we want to do and how do we want to do this. Mm-hmm. Looking at economic development and understanding how important that is to the community.
Right, and so you're getting together and having some meetings and kind of bringing in other folks too to kind of get their thoughts about this, right?
That's correct. What we did, Scott, is we brought in a core team and we had a good representation. We had about 7 people come together and look at a mission and look at key strategic goals.
Right.
But now after we've got that completed, now what we're doing is we're bringing 5 teams looking at the key strategic areas, bringing 5 teams together from the community, and we would like to have them develop objectives for these goals and action plans for the coming year.
Got you. Understood. And I would imagine, and maybe I'm wrong, but some of this maybe comes about because of the changing scope of economic development in the area, because now we see the city of Farmington has an economic development director, and Forset is still working on its efforts and its goals, and so it's important, I guess, maybe to relook at some of your strategic plans?
It's looking at that aspect and understanding that piece, plus the fact that really we're looking at San Juan County as a whole. Mm-hmm. But in order for San Juan County to succeed in any kind of economic development endeavor, we're going to need the participation of the rest of the Four Corners area too, looking at the 4 states as well as the tribes in the area.
Okay.
So we've got to re-look at our overall strategy to determine how do we best go through this whole process.
Right. And you and I have talked about that before, how important the region is in any of these conversations that you're having, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And it's really looking at not only that, but how do we get the community to participate in this effort also, because this is going to affect them just as much as anyone else. And so
you've got some meetings coming up for the community to take part, right?
Yes, we do.
With these 5 goals that you have set out. And so let's take a look. You sent me a little bit of some graphics that we can share with our viewers this morning that can kind of maybe help explain what we're talking about. But goal number 1 is all about partnerships, and actually that meeting is happening right now.
Yeah,
this morning.
The partnerships is coming up on the 12th. Mm-hmm. On the 12th at 7:30.
Right.
And again, what we're looking at there is we understand the fact that we are San Juan County. We have a diverse county, not only looking at the municipalities and the county itself, but we also have tribal communities here within the county.
Right.
So how do we look at this diversity, and how do we understand where everybody is, what they see as their important areas?
Okay.
And so as we bring these partners together and start discussing these different aspects of economic development, we hope to be able to, one, understand what resources we have available, what assets do we have in the area, but also more importantly, what do the different communities see as important? And then from there, what we're beginning to find is that there are some common areas that we all see as challenges or areas of opportunity. And so how do we begin to combine those areas to really forge forward in economic development?
Okay. And so these partnerships are one way to, I guess, start working in that direction.
Right, to really focus on this effort of developing those partnerships and reaching out and really talking to the different municipalities, the counties, the chapters, and reaching out to them and bringing them together. Because really, when you think about it, we are all so focused on what we're doing at times that we don't talk to anybody else. And so this is the way that we can begin to foster that opportunity.
Sure. And is it just governmental agencies, Arvin Trujillo, or could it include other groups and other businesses
That's
too?
exactly what we're looking at. It's just not the governments, but we're looking at industries in the area. We're looking at small businesses in the area. We'd like to get a full composite of the diversity that we have so that we can get a good idea in terms of the diversity that we have and what kind of opportunities do we have, but also what are the gaps? Where do we see things falling between the cracks? And that's as we go through the rest of the goals that we've established.
Right.
You'll begin to see what we're talking about in that aspect.
Okay. Well, let's look at goal number 2, and that's all about organizational development, correct?
Yes. And there, again, we're looking more structurally at FORCID's organization.
Okay.
Looking at our board and saying, okay, how do we begin to develop ourselves so that we're ready to look at economic development? Because we have members on our board who are very proficient in what they do, their jobs, their industry. They understand those aspects, but then it's a different thing when you begin to approach things from an economic development standpoint and saying, okay, here's the industry I'm in, but how should I be looking at as it applies to workforce development, as it applies to business expansion and retention, as it applies to those aspects of partnership, and how do we bring individuals together, and how do we look at combining our efforts in a way that will enhance new industry or help businesses grow, or even look at the educational aspects of things. And what do we begin looking at as far as training is concerned,
right,
or as far as educational opportunities are concerned? So again, it's looking at our board and that development, but it's also looking at our organization now. Now that we're beginning to look at things from a four corners aspect, how do we begin to structure ourselves in order to take advantage of that, or to better serve that entity?
Sure, and I know that already the organization's fairly lean and mean. You don't have a whole team of people necessarily
that's
on the
right.
payroll, and so I guess this also talks about how you can best use your existing staff or make changes to your existing staff.
And how do we grow effectively? Because again, as we begin to grow and develop, what makes sense in terms of us being able to perform effectively and efficiently within the county? Because again, there you don't want to overgrow.
Right.
You don't
right.
want to become bureaucratic in some aspects. You want to be able to continue to be that lean and mean operation that begins to move forward, but you allow other resources out there to take up those necessary areas so that you can advance economic development here within San Juan County, as well as the Four Corners region as a whole.
Sure. And you mentioned your board, and I know you have probably a lot of talent on that board that you can maybe draw from too if
Yes.
you need some help in certain areas without having to hire a staff person maybe to do that.
Yes, I mean, we have individuals who have a lot of experience. They understand their industries. They know the challenges that they have to deal with. They see opportunities out there. So the idea is, how do we begin to help them look at it from a different lens? And how do we begin to help them focus on what would bring new opportunities and, in essence, new prosperity in here to the region as a whole? And how do we begin to partner effectively between industry, small businesses, the educational systems we have in place, the advisory organizations that
Right.
we have here?
Right.
How do we all effectively work together in order to achieve what everybody has as their particular goals or their particular aspirations here in the Four Corners area?
Got it. And so if folks want to meet about this organizational goal, they can do so next Thursday, the 19th. Is that the idea?
That's right now. Right now, that's tentative. We'll
Okay.
get it on our website in terms
Okay.
of when that meeting will actually be. But yes, with all of these, if you are very interested in being a part of this effort, we would surely like to invite you to join us and be a part of the discussion, be a part of this development. Because again, this is affecting this community, and we see your feedback. If you're a part of industry, if you have a small business, if you're a part of the educational system, if you're a part of an advisory group, if you're a part of the chambers or the Rotary, I mean, we're looking for your feedback, and we're looking to see what your ideas are and how do we begin to focus those aspects on the county and find ways that we can enhance our capabilities here looking into the future.
Got you. But these are all planned to be at the Quality Center for Business.
That's correct.
Here down the hall from your office, or at your office, basically, right? Which is 5101 College Boulevard. And folks can call your office and talk to Devin.
That's
Scott,
correct.
566-3702.
Right.
Is the number.
Or they can email her at dscott@Four Corners. It's not the number 4, then written out corners, ed.com.
Okay. Very good. We'll repeat that address to everybody as we go along this morning. But the other goal that I want to ask you a little bit about is business recruitment. And, of course, that's what everyone thinks about, I think, when they think about economic development is, having these gigantic gigafactories coming to San Juan County and cutting the ribbon and having 500 jobs in a drop of a hat, which is easy peasy, right?
Well, it's great to think that they're easy peasy, but there's a lot of work behind that. But
no kidding.
What we're looking at is how do we begin to understand what assets we have here in the county, and then how do we build on those assets in order to look at things like the first piece of it would be looking at business retention and expansion.
The ones that are already here.
The ones that are already here.
Right, and how to make them more successful,
How do we
right?
make them more successful?
Okay.
And by doing that, we begin to build workforce capacity, which is another area we'll be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And we begin to sell ourselves, and we're able to market ourselves. Then we begin to look at those target areas that we are good at and begin to look at how do we begin to market ourselves outside this region. Then comes those opportunities to say, here's what we have to offer. Are there other industries besides those that are currently in place here who would be interested in moving into this region? And then it's what we've talked about also. How do we enhance that? We talked a little bit about the petrochemical plant and the railroad system that we're working on. We've talked about bringing new infrastructure into the area, like broadband enhancement into the area. And so these are other aspects that we got to take a look at to see what do we need as far as infrastructure so that we could attract new businesses.
Is it 1 gig? Is it 2 gig? Is it whatever else the next gig is?
What kind of transportation do we need? Do we need to enhance our land and water use? What is it we got to do in order to meet the needs of new businesses? And that we're not just talking about big industry. We're talking about middle-sized, maybe even some small businesses coming in and beginning to develop, because we have small economic-based businesses that can come in the computer area, in security areas, in educational areas, etc., who can come and locate in the area and start off and begin hiring 1, 2, 3 people and begin to be their growth at that point in time. And so again, those are the things that we're looking at here to see what can we do to begin to diversify our economy here in the region.
Okay, and that's business recruitment. And again, I've always been told, Arvin Trujillo, and correct me if I'm wrong, that it's really the mom and pop and smaller businesses that create most of the jobs in this country. It's not the big corporations that provide most of the employment. Is that a true statement? As far as you know?
That's a true statement, because again, you're looking at gaining those economic-based jobs at that smaller level. And more importantly, it's those smaller businesses, as they begin to develop and grow, that they become more successful, and they're able to bring more people into the region, and they're able to do so in a way that is more business friendly, and it helps build a community.
Sure.
And it builds that aspect of, we talk about time and time improving quality of life. And so again, those small businesses are critical to that aspect, because in some cases those small businesses do grow into those industries.
Right, that's true. And nothing against the chains or the bigger companies, but it's the small businesses and the usual mom and pop businesses that invest more back into those communities, right, than sending it back to the corporate mothership in LA or Chicago or
That's
Japan
right.
or wherever the case may be.
Exactly. And again, it's that having that aspect that builds the diversity here, and in fact having those small businesses here running their particular areas, that could be ways to recruit some of these larger industries to come into the area, because now you got skilled labor in the area, you have processes that these businesses can take advantage of in terms of service related opportunities. And so again, they don't have to worry about contracting at great distances to bring other services in. You have those available here in the local area.
Right, which is kind of what we want.
That's exactly right.
Exactly. The other goal that you have is workforce capacity. I want to ask you a little bit about that too. And of course that, I think, again, correct me if I'm wrong, because that involves the training of the workforce to make sure if somebody does want to relocate here or expand their business here, they're already here, that there is a trained workforce to come in and fill those jobs that are created?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, think about it, Scott. We have a very good educational system here in the local area. We have San Juan College, we have Fort Lewis College, we have Navajo Technical University, we have the Neck College, we have the high schools. And so again, we have a good educational system here, and those institutions, again, keep coming back saying, what is it you want us to be teaching our young people? And we look out and we see what kind of industries are there. How do we begin to prepare our young people to go into careers that one, they would very much like to go into, but two, how do we do it in a manner so that those young people stay here in the region to live?
Right.
You know,
right.
I was fortunate in that at one point in my career when I started, I was a mining engineer. Mining was a big thing here in this region. I was eventually able to move back and raise my family here in this area because I had the education in the particular area that was very useful and productive here in the area, and I was able to make a good living off of that. And so that's what we want for our young people here also.
And is it a way, too, to kind of test those folks of what they know, or folks that are in school or here at San Juan College, to be able to test them and know on a scale, apples to apples, of this is what our workforce knows compared to a workforce in another area of the country or what have you? So if someone was looking at expanding or moving here, they could see, oh, well, here's a group of people, these potential employers that score this high on this particular assessment, and so they could come in, we could come in, and they could do our jobs without a problem.
Yeah, I mean, it's looking at that, but it's also just exactly that. We're able to assess what type of skilled labor do we have in the region, because people are always looking at, when they do come and locate into the area, do we have people in the area that we can employ? And so we want to be prepared for that. And we want to begin, as we look at these different goals, begin to assess what type of industry, what kind of businesses are we looking at? And from that, begin to get information out to our educational systems, to let them know this is what areas are coming in. These are some of the areas where we need to educate our kids in. These are areas that we need to educate our young people in and train them in these areas. Maybe there are certificates that they can get besides degrees. And at that point, they can take advantage of new employment opportunities that may arise as we begin to bring new industry or new businesses into the region.
Sure, right. And the state, I think, has been a partner in some of these things to try
state,
to identify what we do well.
Exactly. You know, there are opportunities and there are resources there that we can pull on to help us do that and accomplish that. Because again, what we're trying to do here is, how do we establish an area where people can come and live and begin to develop and prosper in a given area? Because not, you know, I'm one of those individuals that went out way, got a college education, came back, worked. But again, that's not necessarily for everybody.
Sure.
There may be individuals here who after high school, they would like to get the necessary training or short-term education and then go right to work. You know, are there opportunities there that we have that we can prepare them for that so that they can do that? And there are opportunities for them here in the region to find those types of jobs and to go right to work and to begin to be successful in whatever they choose to do. And
Right.
so those are things that we're looking at also.
And I suppose if you look at this workforce capacity and do it at a regional level, you would see maybe that some regions perform better in some skills and other regions perform better in other skills. Is that a fair statement?
That's a fair statement because, again, everybody has their niche in terms of areas of performance. You have different areas, too, where you have people who are more prone to wanting to go and get a four-year education versus other areas where they may not really be looking at four-year educations, but maybe two-year or maybe certifications in different areas. Maybe they're looking at the trades, welding, carpentry, plumbing, those types of things. And again, people can make good livings looking at these different areas. And so the idea is, how do we help them prepare? And how do we get them ready so that when those opportunities come up, they can then take advantage of that?
Right.
And then how does that help us as a whole still look at the overall goal of diversifying our economy and diversifying those opportunities for individuals here in the region?
That's still the ultimate goal, is it not?
That's correct.
To be doing all that. And so the fifth goal on your strategic plan would be data analysis. And so there's always data, right? So
Yeah.
someone's got to figure out what it all means.
Well, again, that's
And then come
where
on the radio and
sometimes-
talk about it, right?
You know, that's where sometimes we fall down on because we haven't done a good job in this region of really collecting that data that's pertinent to this region. And in that aspect, sometimes we guess at what area we should go or what direction should we go.
Right.
Because we don't really have that data in place to analyze that, to see what really does make sense, what are some opportunities we see, what kind of gaps do we see, and where do we need to fill those gaps? And more importantly, how do we sell and market ourselves? Those are all things that we can do with the data that can be collected. And so again, we're looking at ways to really work with the colleges and the universities, working with the community on how we can begin to gather this data. How do we then take this data and utilize it in a way that we understand? But more importantly, as you indicated, as we begin to understand this data, how can we relay that information back to the layperson so they understand this information coming in from the census or this information coming in from the bureau, different bureaus across the nation or even the state. Here's the numbers that we're getting, but we would be able to translate that into information that the layperson out there, like myself, I'm a part of that, we understand what those numbers mean. And we can relay that, and that will help us in making our decisions. And more importantly, it will help businesses and business people help make their decisions as they look at their own development and as they look at expansion, as they look at growth, as they look at workforce development. All these things, the better they're informed, the better decisions they can make.
Right, and I would assume that one of those things might be what we hear a lot about these days, which is outdoor recreation. And I'm assuming that we could show maybe some data to say, here's why we are investing so much time and effort and money into promoting outdoor recreation, and here's the data to back up these decisions. Is that kind of what we're talking about?
That's what we're looking at. That's what we're looking at, is how do we back up the directions that we're going, and more importantly, how do we determine what direction to
Sure.
go?
Right.
Because again, as we gather this data and the better we understand it, like I said, it will help us in our decision making. It'll help our leaders in the policy development that they have to look at. It will also help our business people become more informed and figure out, where do I invest my money?
Right.
Where do I put my efforts in so that I can not only help myself as a business or as an industry, but I can help my community.
Sure.
And where do I put and invest my time and my money? Because
Right.
it's just not money, but it's our time and our effort also.
Very true. And Arvin Trujillo is my guest this morning. He is the CEO of Four Corners Economic Development. We're talking a little bit about the FORCED's strategic planning process and their five goals that you've identified. And you mentioned before that we have kind of made some guesses in the past, and I would assume those are more educated guesses than
Yes.
just throwing a dart at a board blindfolded or
Well, I
something,
hope
right? No, right? Well, we usually have something to back up our decisions, right?
Right.
Some of these folks. But this is being a more strategic and more thoughtful way of making these decisions is showing the data that backs them.
Yes. And it's a way for us to begin to really develop measurements so that we can look and see, are we successful in what we're doing? And are we making progress in what we want to achieve? And if we're not, then we can ask the question, why? What's happening here? What's the gap? What do we have to do?
Right. Now, let me play devil's advocate for just a moment here,
Okay.
Mr. Trujillo, because I know these are all great ideas and things that everybody, I think, agrees upon is a great idea. But in the meantime, you've got all this swirling around of all these other things that are happening to the local economy. And so obviously things are changing. We know that there's uncertainty in the energy patch and that there's uncertainty maybe with gross receipts taxes and things along that line. And so it's still important to have these goals and plans in place, even with all this swirling about and uncertainty in the future. Is that true?
That's true. Think of it like a basketball game.
Okay.
Okay?
I'm with you.
You go in and you do your research. You go scout the team. You go and see what they do and what their tendencies are and etc. Then the coaches come together. They put a plan together. And you work on that plan for that week in anticipation for that next game. You go into that game, suddenly some unforeseen things may happen. They may have changed their manner of playing style. They may have changed some different things. But you have a basic plan that you have. The coaches can then take that plan and say, okay, we see what we're doing. We'll stick with this plan. Or we make changes, but we're going to make those changes based off of the plan that we put together. So you're just not running one way or the other like a chicken without a head, trying to figure out what to do. You have a basis from which to begin to develop your response to what's happening to you or the environment that is changing, and how do you address those changes and challenges. It's the same thing here. We're putting the game plan together. But that's not to say that we don't anticipate changes, challenges that we don't foresee in the future, but at least we got a game plan together to start with, and we can begin to modify this according to the different environmental changes that may be happening, economic changes that may be happening. At least we have a base from which we can begin to systematically make those adjustments so that we're still moving in the direction that we want to move. And as you mentioned before, we don't catch ourselves just throwing mud against the wall and hoping something will work.
Right.
We have something to base our efforts on.
Keeping your eye on the ball, to use
That's
another
right.
sports analogy, if you don't mind me doing that. But yes, I understand what you're saying. And I would assume then that maybe this plan is based on an earlier plan, and it's just kind of being tweaked a little bit,
Yes,
and kind of fine-tuned as things
been other
change.
plans. That's correct. Because what we're doing here is Four Corners Economic Development is not just looking at Farmington, but we're looking at San Juan County as a whole. We have a number of different municipalities in the area. We have the county in the area, but we also have the chapters in the Navajo Nation within San Juan County. So we're looking at how do we begin to look at San Juan County as a whole. Now, for San Juan County to be successful in what they do, we have to go through different tribal lands, different states, different counties. And so again, expanding outside of San Juan County, how do we develop those partnerships and relationships so that we begin to spread our efforts out so that, in essence, everybody begins to succeed as we move forward also. And so again, the idea we expand this effort so that we're looking at the Four Corners region as a whole. And we're not just caught in silos and saying, I'm just going to deal with my little area here. We move away from that and we look at how we can expand our efforts so that we affect more people. People are seeing the benefits of this effort on a whole, and everybody can share in that benefit. So it doesn't become like a zero-sum game saying who gets the bigger piece of the pie, who wins and who loses. No, we look at it and saying, how do we make the pie bigger so everybody wins?
Right. And your colleagues in your other regions and states, do they share, I hope, your view?
We're working with that to begin to do that. And we talked a little bit about the past future forums that were held.
Right.
And they're
bringing those folks to the table.
Bringing those folks to the table. And people are now beginning to realize that, yes, there is that real opportunity there. And yes, we have common challenges. We have common opportunities. There are things that we can work together. And again, we are still different entities, separate. We have certain priorities each of us are looking at. But we also have commonalities that we can come together and work together to achieve overall economic diversity and well-being within the Four Corners area, given the fact that the economic foundation that we've enjoyed for the past 50 years, the coal, the oil, and the gas, all of that's changing. So how do we change with that and do so in a manner that's beneficial for us and our communities and the people here who live within those communities?
That's the important question to find an answer for, I guess,
that's
right?
That's what we're looking for. That's
right.
What we want to encourage and promote.
Okay, very good. Arvin Trujillo, I appreciate you coming in this morning. Again, if folks would like to maybe give you their 2 cents or show up at some of these meetings about these goals that you have identified, they can call Devin or send an email.
Yes.
And get informed about when those meetings are going to be. And again, the phone number, everybody, is 505-566-3702, or the email at D as in Devin, Scott as in me, at 4 cornersed.com.
That's correct.
All right. Very good, Arvin. Thanks for coming in.
Well, thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Always appreciate our conversations. Thanks again.
You bet.
Arvin Trujillo, my guest here on KSJE, everyone from Four Corners Economic Development. And I'll be back with more in just a moment. Did you enjoy that podcast? We hope that you did. And if you did, share it with your friends. And if you really want to keep podcasts like this coming, please support KSJE. You can do it easily online at ksje.com.